All right, you sick fucks, strap yourselves in. Because today, we're diving headfirst into some batshit crazy shit.
Oh, yeah.
The Japanese Red Army, or JRA,
Hmm.
these weren't your average peace-loving hippies.
Right.
No, sir.
No.
Imagine a bunch of radical motherfuckers who took student activism and cranked it up to 11, then threw in a shit ton of explosives and a sprinkle of international terrorism for good measure.
Sounds fun.
Oh, it is?
Well, Japan in the late 60s was a pressure cooker of social and political unrest.
Right.
The Vietnam War was raging.
Yeah.
Student movements were exploding globally.
Right.
And in Japan, there was this growing sense that the old guard was out of touch, clinging to power while ignoring the needs of the people.
So these JRA asshats weren't just whining about capitalism and waving placards.
Right.
They actually wanted to blow shit up and overthrow the government.
They were definitely aiming for a more impactful form of protest.
Yeah.
Their goal was nothing less than a global communist revolution.
Oh, wow.
They saw themselves as the vanguard, the elite few, willing to use any means necessary to smash the system and usher in a new world order.
Okay, so let's cut the crap and get to the good stuff.
Okay.
What kind of crazy shit did these JRA nutjobs actually pull off?
Well, their resume is pretty impressive.
Right.
If you're into that sort of thing. We're talking hijackings, bombings, assassinations.
Oh, wow.
You name it, they probably tried it.
Okay.
They operated on a global scale,
Right?
striking targets from Tel Aviv to Jakarta,
Wow.
leaving a trail of chaos and bloodshed in their wake.
So these guys were basically the rock stars of international terrorism.
They certainly had their admirers,
Right.
especially among radical leftist groups, but they were far from glamorous.
Okay.
Their actions were brutal, often targeting innocent civilians,
Right.
and their ideology was a twisted mix of revolutionary zeal and cold-blooded fanaticism.
Let's dive into some of their most notorious attacks.
Okay.
First up, the Lod Airport Massacre in 1972. This shit was straight out of a goddamn horror movie.
It was a horrific event.
Yeah.
3 JRA members,
Okay.
armed with machine guns and grenades,
Right.
stormed Lod Airport in Tel Aviv,
Okay.
which is now Ben Gurion International Airport,
Right.
and opened fire indiscriminately on passengers in the terminal.
Oh, my God.
26 people were
I
killed,
face this.
and over 80 were wounded.
Jesus Christ.
It was
What the fuck were they thinking?
their stated goal was to attack enemies of the Palestinian people,
Right.
but the victims were mostly innocent travelers from Puerto Rico.
Oh, wow.
It was a senseless act of violence that shocked the world and cemented the JRA's reputation as a ruthless and unpredictable force.
Okay, so 2 of the attackers were killed during the massacre.
That's right.
One by suicide, the other in the crossfire.
Yeah.
But one of them actually survived.
He did.
Kushu Okamoto, right.
Yeah.
What the hell happened to this guy?
Well, Okamoto was captured and imprisoned in Israel. He became a bit of a cause celeb for leftist groups who saw him as a political prisoner.
Right.
And then in a bizarre twist,
Yeah.
he was released in a prisoner exchange in 1985 and ended up in Lebanon,
Okay.
where he was granted political asylum in 1999.
Wait, so he went from mass murderer to political refugee.
It's a strange world.
That's some bullshit.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to the JRA's other favorite pastime.
What's that?
Hijacking airplanes.
Oh, yes.
They seem to have a real knack for that.
They did.
And they weren't just joyriding.
Yeah, no.
These hijackings were carefully planned operations designed to advance their political agenda
That's right.
and strike fear into the hearts of governments worldwide.
Exactly.
All right, hit us with the highlights.
Right.
What were some of their most audacious hijackings?
Well, there was Japan Airlines Flight 404 in 1973.
Okay.
They hijacked the plane en route from Amsterdam to Tokyo, forced it to land in Libya, released the passengers, and then blew the damn thing up. It was a clear message that they were not fucking around.
Damn, talk about making a statement.
Right.
What else? Then there was Japan Airlines Flight 472 in 1977.
Okay.
They forced it to land in Bangladesh and demanded the release of imprisoned JRA members and a $6 million ransom.
$6 million.
Yep.
These guys were playing for keeps.
They were.
Did they get their payday?
The Japanese government caved to their demands,
Really?
much to the embarrassment of the authorities and the outrage of many.
Wow.
It was a major propaganda victory for the JRA and a clear demonstration of their ability to hold governments hostage to their demands.
And then there's the mysterious Malaysian Airlines System Flight 653 in 1977,
Yeah.
which crashed, killing everyone on board.
That's right.
What happened there?
The circumstances surrounding the crash remain murky, but it's widely suspected that the JRA was involved.
Okay.
Some evidence suggests they may have hijacked the plane, though their exact motives remain unknown.
It's a chilling reminder of the group's ruthless nature and their willingness to resort to extreme violence to achieve their goals.
So we've got a massacre at an airport, a couple of hijacked planes, one blown up and the other held for ransom.
Right.
And a mysterious plane crash that may or may not have been their doing.
Exactly.
These guys were busy little bees.
They were very busy.
But who was the mastermind behind this whole JRA shit show?
The woman behind the curtain was Fusako Shigenobu.
Okay.
She was the brains of the operation, the strategist, the ideologue. Think of her as the JRA's evil genius, the puppet master pulling the strings from the shadows.
Sounds like one badass bitch.
She was a fascinating and complex figure.
Right.
Brilliant, charismatic, and utterly ruthless.
Yeah.
She believed that violence was a necessary tool for revolution. And was willing to sacrifice anything, including the lives of innocent people, to achieve her goals.
And she managed to evade capture for years.
She did. She was a master of disguise and evasion. Constantly on the move, operating from safe houses and underground networks.
Wow.
She was finally captured in 2000 in Osaka, Japan, after decades on the run.
So what happened to her?
Well,
did she get to enjoy her golden years, sipping cocktails on a beach somewhere?
Not exactly.
What happened?
She was extradited to France.
Oh, wow.
And convicted of her role in the 1974 siege of the French embassy in The Hague.
Okay.
She was sentenced to 20 years in prison.
Wow.
She was released in 2011 and continues to live in Japan.
Right.
A controversial figure who remains unapologetic about her past actions.
All right, so we've got Shigenobu, the queen bee of the JRA.
Yeah.
Who else was in her inner circle?
Wow.
Who were the other key players in this twisted game?
There was Tsuyoshi Okudera, the co-founder of the JRA. He was one of the original members, a charismatic and fiery leader who helped shape the group's ideology and strategy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for him, his revolutionary career was cut short during the Lod Airport massacre.
Yeah, I guess you could say he went out with a bang, literally.
He did.
Then there was Osamu Maruka.
Yes.
Another prominent member.
That's right.
He was involved in several high-profile hijackings and was known for his tactical skills and ruthlessness.
Yeah.
He was eventually caught and given a life sentence, dying in prison in 2011.
That's right.
So we've got the mastermind, the co-founder, and the hijacking expert.
That's right.
Quite the lineup. Anyone else worth mentioning?
Oh, there's one more you should know about.
Okay.
Yuki Kimura.
Okay.
Their explosives expert.
Right.
He was caught in New Jersey in 1988 with a stash of explosives, apparently planning an attack in the U.S.
New Jersey.
Yep.
What the hell is he doing all the way over here?
Well, the JRA's reach extended far beyond Japan.
Oh, wow.
They had connections and operatives all over the world.
Right.
And they weren't afraid to strike targets wherever they saw an opportunity to advance their cause.
Okay, so we've covered the JRA's early days, their connection to the PFLP and some of their most insane attacks. But what eventually happened to them? Did they just fade away, or did they go out in a blaze of glory?
Their decline was gradual but inevitable.
Okay.
By the late 80s, the JRA was a shadow of its former self.
What happened?
Well,
did they finally run out of explosives and plane tickets?
It was more complicated than that. There were internal disputes,
right?
A loss of support from their former allies, and increased pressure from law enforcement agencies worldwide.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Even radical revolutionaries can't keep up that level of crazy forever.
Right.
So when did this reign of terror officially end?
Shigenobu formally disbanded the group in 2001.
Oh, wow.
It was the end of an era.
Right.
A final punctuation mark on one of the most bizarre and violent chapters in the history of leftist extremism.
Damn, what a wild ride.
It is.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the world of the JRA. From their origins in the radical student movements of 1960s Japan to their evolution into a global force of terror.
Right.
These guys were truly something else.
They were fascinating.
They were a product of their time, a reflection of the political and social upheavals that shook the world in the late 20th century.
That's right.
But let's be real, there were also a bunch of crazy motherfuckers who went way too far.
That's a matter of perspective, but there's no denying that their actions had a profound impact, leaving a legacy of violence, fear, and unanswered questions.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, we're back and ready to dive deeper into the twisted world of the JRA.
Okay.
Before the break, we talked about some of their most insane attacks.
Right.
But what the hell were these guys actually fighting for?
Yeah.
What was their end game?
Well, their ideology was a real hodgepodge of revolutionary ideas.
Okay.
They drew inspiration from Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, and even elements of Palestinian nationalism. It was a potent cocktail of anti-imperialism, anti-capitalism, and a whole lot of rage against the machine.
So basically a bunch of pissed-off intellectuals who decided to take their angst out on the rest of the world.
In a nutshell, yes.
Okay.
They saw themselves as the vanguard of a global communist revolution, fighting against what they perceived as the oppressive forces of capitalism, imperialism, and Western hegemony.
And they figured the best way to achieve this was by hijacking planes and blowing shit up.
Well,
sounds like a brilliant strategy.
Their tactics were certainly effective in grabbing headlines and spreading fear.
Right.
But in terms of achieving their ultimate goal of sparking a global revolution, they were pretty much a failure.
Yeah, I guess you could say their revolution didn't exactly catch fire.
Right.
So besides their whacked-out ideology, what else made the JRA tick? They were operating out of Lebanon, right?
Yeah.
How the hell did they end up there?
Their connection with Lebanon was key to their survival and their ability to carry out attacks on a global scale. They formed a close alliance with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or the PFLP.
The PFLP.
One of the most notorious Palestinian militant groups at the time.
Those guys were hardcore.
Yeah.
What was in it for them? Why would they team up with a bunch of Japanese radicals?
It was a mutually beneficial arrangement.
Okay.
The PFLP provided the JRA with training, weapons, funding, and a safe haven in Lebanon, which was basically a lawless free-for-all in the 70s and 80s.
Wow.
In return, the JRA offered their skills, manpower, and a shared hatred of all things Western.
So they were like the odd couple of international terrorism, united by their shared love of explosives and revolution.
You could say that. They had a common enemy and a shared belief in the power of armed struggle to achieve their goals.
All right, so we've got these Japanese revolutionaries shacking up with Palestinian militants in Lebanon.
Right.
Talk about a match made in hell. But they weren't just hanging out in Beirut sipping mint tea, right?
No.
They were still pulling off attacks all over the world.
That's right.
What the hell was their global reach?
Their network was surprisingly extensive.
Okay.
They had connections and operatives in Europe, Southeast Asia, South America.
Wow.
Pretty much anywhere they thought they could strike a blow against the imperialist enemy. Remember those mortar attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta and the French Embassy in Rome?
Yeah, those were some bold moves.
Yeah.
Did they take credit for those?
They claimed responsibility for those attacks and many others. They were determined to make their presence felt on the world stage.
Okay.
And they were willing to go to great lengths to achieve that goal.
Okay, so we've covered their ideology, their global network, and some of their most insane attacks.
Yeah.
But let's be real, these guys were a bunch of fucking lunatics, right?
Well,
what kind of people would join a group like the JRA?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
Many of them were idealistic young people, students, intellectuals who were disillusioned with the state of the world and drawn to the JRA's message of radical change.
Right.
They believed they were fighting for a just cause, even if their methods were extreme and often brutal.
So a bunch of misguided idealists who took things way too far.
That's one way to look at it.
Okay.
Of course, there are also those who are attracted to the violence and the thrill of living on the edge.
Right.
The JRA offered them a sense of purpose, a chance to be part of something bigger than themselves, and an opportunity to lash out at a world they saw as corrupt and unjust.
So a mix of true believers and adrenaline junkies.
Yeah.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It was a volatile mix, for sure.
Yeah.
And it eventually led to internal tensions and divisions within the group.
Right.
Remember how Shigenobu formally disbanded the JRA in 2001?
Yeah.
Well, part of the reason for that was because the group was fracturing from within.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep a bunch of radical nutjobs on the same page for too long.
Right.
Especially when they're scattered all over the globe. What kind of internal conflicts were they having?
There were disagreements about strategy, tactics, and even ideology.
Okay.
Some members wanted to focus on supporting Palestinian liberation struggles,
right,
while others wanted to carry out attacks in Europe or Japan.
Huh.
There were also personal rivalries and power struggles within the leadership.
Okay.
It was a pressure cooker of conflicting personalities and ambitions.
Yeah.
And it eventually reached a boiling point.
So their internal drama contributed to their downfall.
Yeah.
It wasn't just external pressure from law enforcement and intelligence agencies.
It was a combination of factors.
Yeah.
The JRA was facing increased scrutiny and crackdowns from authorities worldwide.
Right.
Their funding sources were drying up.
Yeah.
Their safe havens were disappearing.
Right.
And their recruitment efforts were failing.
Guess even terrorists have to deal with HR issues and budget cuts.
It's not all bombs and bullets.
Right.
Running a terrorist organization is a complex and challenging business, especially when you're trying to maintain a global network and evade the world's most sophisticated intelligence agencies.
Well, they managed to do it for a pretty long time.
They did.
They were active for over 3 decades.
That's right. They had a good run, but eventually the walls closed in.
Yeah.
Their decline was inevitable, really.
All right, so we've covered their rise and fall,
Mm-hmm.
but what about their legacy?
Yeah.
How should we remember the JRA?
Mm.
Are they terrorists, freedom fighters, or just a bunch of crazy motherfuckers who went too far?
That's a question that historians and political analysts are still debating.
Right.
Their actions were undeniably violent and caused a lot of suffering.
Yeah.
But they also reflected the political and social anxieties of their time.
Okay.
A time of intense ideological struggle and global upheaval.
Yeah. But blowing up planes and killing innocent people is never justified,
I agree.
no matter what your political beliefs are.
Their methods were brutal and often indiscriminate. And their ideology was a twisted mix of revolutionary zeal and cold-blooded fanaticism.
Yeah.
But they also forced the world to confront uncomfortable truths about inequality, injustice, and the limits of peaceful protest.
Damn, that's deep.
It is.
I need another drink after this.
Yeah.
But seriously, this has been one hell of a deep dive.
It has.
The JRA, a bunch of radical motherfuckers who went from student protests to international terrorism.
That's right.
Who knew?
That's quite a story.
All right, so we've spent the last hour or so digging into the twisted history of the Japanese Red Army.
It's been a wild ride.
These guys were seriously fucked up.
Oh, yeah.
But they also managed to hold the world's attention for a good 3 decades. What the fuck was their secret sauce?
Well,
How do they stay relevant for so long?
a big part of it was their audacity.
Audacity.
Yeah, they weren't afraid to think big, to go after high-profile targets,
Whoa.
to make bold statements that grabbed headlines and shook governments to their core. They were masters of spectacle, of using violence and terror to create a sense of chaos and unpredictability.
Yeah, they definitely knew how to put on a show.
Right.
But spectacle only gets you so far.
Of course.
They must have had some serious organizational skills to pull off these complex operations, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They were incredibly disciplined, well-organized,
Yeah.
and had a sophisticated network of support that stretched across continents.
Wow.
They were able to move money, weapons, and operatives around the world with remarkable efficiency,
Wow.
evading intelligence agencies and law enforcement for years.
It's mind-blowing how they managed to stay one step ahead of the game for so long.
Yeah.
They were like the Jason Bourne of terrorist groups, always disappearing before anyone could catch them.
They had a knack for adaptation and reinvention.
Adaptation.
Yeah. As the political landscape shifted and their old tactics became less effective,
Right.
they were constantly evolving, developing new strategies, and forging new alliances to stay relevant and dangerous.
Okay, so they were audacious, organized, and adaptable.
That's right.
But let's be real, their brand of revolution was pretty damn brutal.
Well,
They weren't exactly winning hearts and minds with their tactics.
that's true.
Right.
Their violence alienated many potential sympathizers and ultimately proved to be their undoing. They seemed more focused on making a statement than on building a genuine revolutionary movement.
Yeah, they were kind of like the rock stars of terrorism. Big on theatrics, but short on substance.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay.
They were masters of propaganda, of using violence to create a media spectacle
Right.
and project an image of power and defiance. But their actions often seemed more symbolic than strategic,
Right.
more about making a point than achieving a tangible political goal.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can we learn from the JRA's fucked up saga?
I think it's a cautionary tale about the seductive power of extremism and the dangers of romanticizing violence. It's a reminder that even with noble goals, righteous anger can lead to terrible acts,
Right?
and that the path to meaningful change rarely runs through a battlefield.
Damn, that's deep.
It is a complicated story.
I need another drink after this.
Me too.
But seriously, folks, the JRA's story is a wild ride through the dark underbelly of international terrorism.
It is.
It's a story of ideological fanaticism, cold-blooded violence, and ultimately the futility of trying to change the world through bloodshed and terror.
It's a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the human capacity for both good and evil.
Right.
And the complex factors that drive individuals and groups to embrace extremism and violence.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for this deep dive into the world of the Japanese Red Army.
I hope you enjoyed it.
We hope you learned something, even if it's just that the world is a stranger and more fucked up place than you ever imagined.
It is.
Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll be exploring another fascinating and fucked up corner of history.
Until then, stay curious, stay critical, and for fuck's sake, stay safe out there. It's so big.